book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about my spring reads for the Southern Hemisphere, of course. If you didn't know, this is a 7 on Sunday, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out and you can participate in one of these topics in the future. We should have new topics up by now. Every single time we come to this transitional period in the year is very interesting. I probably be seeing a lot of full-time Cozy Time book tags because I always do, but I live in the Southern Hemisphere. I am located in Australia, and you know, I want to be in all the seasonal fun, but I kind of can't be in the same way. The temperature here, the climate here, completely different from majority of the booktube that I see resides. With all the 7 on Sunday participants, thank you so much for joining us. I want to also make this friendly to everyone because I understand what it's like to see all these fall videos during this time and our hemisphere not being acknowledged. So I guess we got a little bit of a chance to be loud and proud here. And I'm gonna share some springish reads with you today. Now, a lot of people when they think of spring reads, they do think of contemporaries, whereas I think of like vivid fantasies. I think of either gardens in fantasies or just kingdoms. That's what I think of when I think of spring. Something that's new and inviting and escape worthy. Those are what I'm talking about today. So I guess without further ado, I want to show you the spring reads that are on my list. The first book I have to recommend during the season is a book that I read last season. I kind of really wish that I read it in spring. In fact, I'm pretty sure this book came out in Australian spring last year, and it would have been really cool if I read it as soon as it came out, but I read it in winter. There's that, can't take it back. Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White. Like I said, kingdoms. When I think about kingdoms, for some reason, what comes to mind is either spring or winter. I mean, not usually winter. I mean, winter, it's more like you want to escape the fact that it's very cold outside. And sometimes during winter, you just think of escaping the reality. I do think about kingdoms, and I think about gardens, two things that I associate spring with. For some reason, this book just gives me so many spring vibes. Just thinking about the tournaments and the magic system within here, it just all screams spring to me. The Guinevere Deception is a book I highly recommend. If you have not yet read it, please do yourself a favor. It's worth it. Please read it. And also look out for the rest of the books. I think that the Camelot Betrayal has been pushed to 2021. Now, this book that I'm just about to mention, I actually am only mentioning for spring because I read it in spring last year. It just so happened to be one of the only books besides Berserk, because I loved the Berserk series, that I absolutely immersed myself in during spring of last year. And that, my friends, is The Daughter of the Pirate King duology by Trisha Levenseller. I love this duology, and I don't talk about it enough on my channel. It is really good, and the reason why I don't talk about it enough on my channel is because I was barely booktubing at the time I was reading this book. I was literally in a booktube slump because there were things that were going on with my mental health, so I had to take a bit of a break. But I read and I fully immersed myself in this duology, and let me tell you, I had a really good time with it, and I really just want to reread it now, just thinking about it. I just know for a fact that I read it either in September, October, or November. I know people do cringe at the romance, but I eat that up. That's all there is to it. I remember this book for being a book that I read in spring. I loved it, and that's why I kind of recommend it as a spring read. I would say if there's any other season that it would suit, it would definitely be summer, but you know, things are starting to warm up in spring. So I guess that a water-based fantasy is kind of a good thing during spring. So of course I'd recommend it for that aspect too, but I kind of have a bit of emotional attachment to it when it comes to it being a spring read. And now let's talk about a manga series that reminds me of spring. I'm going to be talking about The Promised Neverland. Now, for some reason, I kind of only feel half qualified to give this opinion, and the reason why is because I haven't actually read the manga yet. I actually just received the manga in the mail last week. I'm very much looking forward to reading the manga, and I'm planning to read it during spring. But the reason why it gives me spring vibes is that half of the story, they're essentially spending their time outdoors in a garden. Like, if that doesn't scream spring to me, I don't know what does. By the way that this first cover looks, and by the way I'm describing it right now, it sounds like a light, fluffy slice of life story. It is not. It is really dark, but it has this spring vibe to it. It is a very creepy story. In fact, I think that it would very much suit Halloween time because it's very dark. It's very much kind of almost dystopian in a way, and it's a little bit depressing, but it is so good. And if you have not tried The Promised Neverland yet, I would suggest that you do. You know what? Try out the anime, see how you go, but I will be talking about the manga on my channel as the days go on because I'm so excited to read this manga finally, because I loved the story that I saw got adapted, and I think that I'm just gonna love the manga even more. I think that this is a very eerie spring read. It is very much creepy, but out of all seasons, it gives me spring vibes. And the next book that I would recommend for spring would be the Folk of Air series by Holly Black. And once again, I don't know if I'm fully qualified for this opinion because I have not actually read The Queen of Nothing yet, which is the third book. I don't even own that book yet. And I don't actually know whether I should, to be honest, because I have heard that there's not really too much payoff when it comes to the series. But this book gives me spring vibes because fae and courts, royalty, for some reason that screams spring to me, and also these covers. It kind of looks a little bit springish as well. I do recommend it as one of those reads. I would say if you want to go in here experiencing really good world building, this is not your series. But I enjoyed it while I read it, or while I was in the middle of reading The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King. I don't absolutely love this series, and I actually want to see how Queen of Nothing goes, if it's worth owning on my shelf. I don't know, but what I do know is that I did enjoy it. And most important of all, it gave me spring vibes. Then I'm going to a book series that absolutely blew my mind to the point that I was overwhelmingly surprised. In fact, the next few series I'm going to be talking about are like top tier series for me. This next one I'm going to be talking about is Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. I have been raving about this series, and yes, the hype is real. This series is really amazing. You know what? For some odd reason, I don't see too many people picking this series up, so I just decided I'm going to recommend it as a spring read. And also, when I think about it, I read The Shadow of the Fox, I'd say in September of last year, which obviously is Australian spring. And so it kind of once again reminds me of when I read Daughter of the Pirate King. It was reading it at that time of the year that kind of signified that for me, but also the fantastical elements of the series definitely signify it as a spring read for me. And I think if there is any book series, any fantasy series that you need to pick up during the spring, Shadow of the Fox is that series, or it's one of them, because obviously I've got to recommend a few more. But Shadow of the Fox is so good, and you guys are missing out. If you're putting it off, if you have it on your do not be read list, you're missing out. If you haven't tried it out yet, you are missing out. I will be praising Julie Kagawa forever for that series. The second last book I have to recommend for a spring read is a book that I gave a 5 out of 5 stars last season, and I kind of really wish that I read it during spring because it just feels so springy, and once you'll see the cover, you know it feels springy. Bone Crier's Moon by Catherine Purdy. Look at how springy that cover is. Look at all the green. Look at all the green. Just all screams spring to me, but also the concept, the fantastical elements in here, everything about this book. This is a spring read, 100%. I didn't actually expect it to be that good or that deep or that mythological, but it was. And not only that, I love hate to love romances so much. It contains a few tropes that I just absolutely love, that are just some of my guilty pleasures. I just adore them. It had me swooning. And I know it has a few lower star ratings on GOODREADS. That's what I went into this book knowing. But it's a 5 out of 5 star for me. I love this book so much because it just gives me so many amazing feelings. Because I love the tropes, I love the setting, I love the mythology behind all of this, and I just want to know more about this world, and I want it to be expanded upon so much. And we are getting a trilogy, which is exciting. Bone Crier's Dawn is available for pre-order now. I just cannot contain my excitement. But yes, Bone Crier's Moon, an amazing spring read I highly recommend if you have not checked it out yet. The final book series that I recommend during spring, and you know what, I would reread the series in spring again, The Day of the Bad Trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. Like I mentioned, courts, kingdoms, and on top of that, an amazing Arabian fantasy that is actually pretty accurate to the culture. I recommend this trilogy so much, and if you have not read it yet, what are you doing with your life? You just need to. You need the Day of the Bad Trilogy in your life. I remember literally, I think in 2016, when City of Brass first came out, I was like, that's a pretty cover, I want to pick it up, but I put it off for so long. And the reason why I put City of Brass and the rest of the Day of the Bad Trilogy off for so long is because I've mentioned this on my channel previously. As an Arabic woman, I am very skeptical when it comes to Arabic fantasy because I've seen people butcher Arabic fantasies, and I've mentioned this before. Aladdin is a perfect example of that. I will never forgive Disney for bringing that disgrace to my culture. Anyway, that's a side note. So growing up, only seeing that representation of Arabic culture in media, it has always made me skeptical about any other adaptation or any other book that is inspired by Arabic culture. So I always go into those books pretty skeptical. And I do have to say, I've also read The Wrath from the Dawn, and I have read Rebel of the Sands. And you know, those series have been okay to me, but they have never really stand out to me in the long run. This series has changed everything. I now have a really deep connection with the Day of a Bad Trilogy, it is not funny. I love it so much, and I cannot believe that I put it off for so long because I was too scared. I should have listened to the hype for this one. I like to observe, and I saw a lot of good reviews for this series. And you know what? I just decided at that point, people are giving it good reviews, I will give it a chance, and I'm so happy that I did, and I'm happy that the hype was real. The series is worthy. It is so worthy. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to enjoy this video today, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Also, tell me about some books that remind you of spring or remind you of autumn. You know, whichever hemisphere you are welcome to be in my comments and chat about them. And don't forget, if you want to follow me on my social medias, I'm at gswizzelbooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.